maybe looking for freedom. So we will now continue, and let's go now to do some little comparisons, some comparisons between the Jewish presence in Peru versus the Jewish presence in North America. So what was the difference? Why, for example, nowadays we can see a much larger community in North America, in the United States, for example, versus the one of Peru. What happened with that initial Jewish community here in Peru? Well, first of all, in North America, there was no inquisition as the one that was established here in Peru by the Spaniards. The Spanish conquest was very oppressive in terms of religion. There was no freedom of religion at all. If you wanted to come to Peru, if you were Spanish, you had to prove with documents that you were like at least 4 generations old, like a Catholic. And if you were a new converso, you had to had certain like friends and connections to come to this territory. The reason is because the Spanish, they were not just conquering, they were gaining this territory for God. So God was the one that opened, this territory for them, and they needed to, like return that favor from God, gaining souls in the indigenous, like the indigenous souls had to be gained for God, right? So that's why they didn't want any competition. So this initial community was not left free. They were not all killed, but eventually the external pressure made them to convert. So they turned eventually, not immediately, but eventually like 2, 3, 4 generations after their arrival, they had to melt and they had to finally accept a new faith, a new religion, just for survival. So we will also now continue with these 2 terminologies that I'm going to be mentioning also for the well understanding of this period, the time period we are talking about. So back in the old days, in the colonial times, a person that was, let's say, a converso, but that in secret continued practicing the Judaism, their faith, was called marrano in the colonial times. And many of these men, marranos, were discovered also by the Inquisition here in the territories of Peru, in the big territories of Peru that eventually was so big that also covered part of Ecuador, part of Colombia, part of Brazil, part of Chile, part of Bolivia, part of Argentina, and the territory of Peru. So imagine how big this territory was. There was one Inquisition that chased all of these people. And also we have here another word that is important for you to know, that is called the crypto-Judaism, which is more the way nowadays we're going to be referring to these men. We are not using anymore the word marrano as it used to be in the old days. The historians refer to these people as crypto-Judeos. Crypto is related with the word secret. So this was this is a new terminology. So crypto-Judaism or crypto-Judaism. And talking about crypto-Judaism, talking about a possible of the marrano of those days of the colonial times, a man that you would never imagine in your life being a crypto-Judeo. So who was this person? Who was this character? Who was Francisco Pizarro? Who can tell me who was Francisco Pizarro? What a character, by the way, of the history of Peru. So no worries, let me tell you who he was. He was the conquistador of this territory. Muy bien, Sayuri. El conquistador, the conquistador of Peru. Francisco Pizarro is one of the most famous Spanish characters in this territory. And let me answer the question of Robin. If they had the power, why be crypto and not return to Judaism? Muy bien, Robin. Well, the Jewish families, Jewish men that came to the New World, to the territories that belonged to Spain, they were coming like promising that they were Catholic, because remember that the territory was not in the hands of these conquistadors. The territory was in the hands of the King of Spain. And the kings of Spain were extremely Catholic. The kingdom of Spain was extremely Catholic back then. They had the support of the Vatican, and they were here in these territories to gain souls to God, right? Their intention was just not conquering the Americas back then, was even being able to conquer Jerusalem if possible, right? Because we're talking about fanatics, religious fanatics of that time. So this is why it was necessary to maintain low profile. And if you were Jew in Spain, most likely you will not be able to come like openly Jew to the New World. So these people, the ones that came to this territory, they learned to be low profile if they wanted to survive. And that possibly was the case of Francisco Pizarro. Thank you, Robin, for your question. I hope I answered it properly. So Francisco Pizarro, a man well known as the conquistador of Peru, is a man who is covered in mystery, in secrecy. So it's a really interesting character, because Francisco Pizarro, although we know a lot from his family side, let's say the branch from his father side, we know almost nothing from his mother branch, from the side of his mother. Seems that Pizarro was trying at some point to hide some things related with his maternal side. So this is also possibility. The possibility is that he had connections from his mother's side with the Jewish community. And a little bit ahead also, I'm going to tell you the name of a historian, a Peruvian archaeologist that has published a book about his research related with Pizarro. And he believes he was descendant from his mother's side of Jews. Why we know this? Why we think this? Well, the mother of Pizarro, which we know very little about, but we know that she was let's say she belonged to a family of traders, which were in the business of the fabrics and clothes, and also that she was Portuguese. Back in the colonial times, when someone was Portuguese, someone was pointed out as Portuguese, that most likely meant that was Jewish, right? So Pizarro tried to banish a little bit that part of his story. But there's other thing very interesting about Pizarro. Judy is asking something. Were many Jewish people in Peru killed for their beliefs during this time? Judy, thanks for the question. Honestly, we don't know exactly the numbers of people, or Jewish people, that were killed by the Inquisition in this case. There is an official number. Now, the Inquisition, we're going to be talking about the Inquisition in a little while. The Inquisition killed in total, in about 250 years in Peru, 32 people in total. Can you believe that? Well, very hard to believe, but that's the official number. And from that number, 23 were Jewish men, and only one woman in that group. So in total, 23 were Jewish. So hard to believe, but that is the official information from the Inquisition here in Peru. So why I'm showing you this box? Thanks, Judy, for your question. We have here a box of a metal that is lead, plomo, right? So this box is really interesting, very curious. So it was the 1970s when an investigation was done in the Cathedral of Lima. The Cathedral of Lima, by the way, my friends, is where the body of Pizarro rests. Pizarro was murdered in the year 1540, 1541, sorry, by an enemy band, by the Almagristas, which, by the way, were two bands that wanted to dominate this territory in the period of the conquistadors. So Pizarro was murdered, and his last wish was to be buried in the cathedral that he helped to build here in Lima. He had no big possessions in Spain. He gained all his prestige in Peru, so he wanted to be buried here. So he was buried at the entrance of the cathedral on the left wing, let's say, left side, left entrance, right entrance of the cathedral. And everybody believed his body was there, like since that year, 1541. But in the 1970s, an investigation was conducted below the main altar of the cathedral, and surprisingly, the body of Pizarro was discovered there. So why the body of Pizarro was moved to the front of the cathedral? And most interestingly, the skull of Pizarro was delicately put in a box, like separate from the rest of the bones of the body. So here we have the top of the box, and we can even read over here. I'll try to use this. The Marquis Don Francisco Pizarro, conquistador of these territories. So here we can see even the inscription in which his name is represented. So we have also here the skull, right, in this box, and this is a section below the main altar. So these are the crypts of the main altar of the cathedral. So around this section is where the box was discovered, in this part. So Mr. Hugo Luden, or Dr. Hugo Luden, an archaeologist, also a man who jumped to the fame due to his investigations below the main altar of the cathedral, based on the investigation on the skull of Pizarro and the box where the skull laid. He came to the conclusion after his long investigation that there was a big possibility that Pizarro was Jew. And why? What was the element that made him believe this? You know that there are many inconclusive things about Pizarro, many things that are in the shade about his life. But the box where Pizarro's skull was had a symbol in the central part, which I'm going to show you again in a moment, that looked exactly the same to this one. I don't know if you've been able to see this before, my friends, but he had investigated this symbol. This is the six-petaled rose, and he recognized that this element is connected to the Jewish community, especially the Sephardic community that also existed in Spain. And also this element, this six-petaled rose, can be traced back to about 2,000 years ago, the time period of Jesus Christ. So this is, again, the top of the box where Pizarro's skull was discovered, and you can see the six-petaled rose, which also is connected to the Star of David. So here you can see ossaries from the period that I was mentioning, about 2,000 years ago. This is a tradition called the oscillation, which means, the tradition is, first of all, letting the body to disintegrate first, and after the body is completely disintegrated, the bones are recollected and are put in these boxes. If you wish, you can later also keep reading more about this tradition. This is the oscillation. So, and we can also find the same symbol. This is not a Catholic symbol. And this is also the biggest clue for the historian Hugo Luden to believe Pizarro was a crypto-Judeo. He was in secret Jewish. So here we have, well, another symbol. Who can tell me which this symbol, what is the institution that used this symbol? Who can tell me in the comments? Anyone has seen this symbol before? So if not, let me tell you the institution. Difficult? No worries. Well, it's something about the religion, right? But this was not let's say, a institution that belonged to the church. Mary, not the crown. It belonged to the crown, but it was not related with the crown. Well, this is the symbol of the Inquisition. The Inquisition. And here we can see the sword that represented the harsh treatment the institution gave to the heretics, right? And the olive leaf, or the branch of olive, that represented the reconciliation after passing through the Inquisition. So the Spanish Inquisition in America, the Inquisition was very well spread, although, well, 3 inquisitions for such vast territory were not enough, but well spread, because there was one in Mexico, one in Peru, and the last one in Colombia, in Cartagena de Indias. Territories which were highly populated back in the colonial times, in the Spanish colonial period. And the one of Lima, by the way, which was born at the same time of the Mexican in 1569, it started operated in the year 1570, and it lasted until the year 1820, 1 year before the independence of Peru. So what was the function of the Inquisition? And by the way, this is the way how the Inquisition building looks nowadays. The Inquisition was an institution with tremendous power. They were so rich at some point that they functioned as a bank. Can you imagine that? They had so much power that they could give you cash if you need it. If you were a good, let's say, servant to the crown. They had lots of money. So how come the Inquisition had this much money? Well, they confiscated money from the people they imprisoned, from the people that were accused of being heretics, of not, let's say, participating actively in a proper way of the mass services, for being Protestants, for being witches, for being Jewish. So all of the people that were accused of doing wrong, they came to the Inquisition, and if they were not able to prove that they were innocent, their wealth would be confiscated immediately, and if they didn't repent it, they even were killed at the end. So the Inquisition had a tremendous power, but initially the Inquisition was sort of like in this territory not really looking for Jewish, because the crown of Spain did not believe they were Jewish here. Remember, they had a filter, right? They had a filter. They believed here we just had Catholics that were converted from heart, if they were not, let's say, from family that were Catholic, but they were converted. But in the reality, no. Many of the people that were here in this territory in the first decades of the 16th century, they were starting to live a life of freedom thanks to the distance from the territories of Spain. So inside the Museum of the Inquisition, which, by the way, nowadays it is not open. It closed before the pandemic for a process of restoration. This museum belongs to the Congress. By the way, at the entrance, the name of the museum says Museum of the Congress and the Inquisition, because when this building stopped being an Inquisition, it was repurposed as the first Congress of Peru. So this is why the Congress was there until the beginnings of the 20th century. This is known as one of the most energetically loaded buildings in the whole city of Lima. And this is because of the chamber of the torments, for example, which here we can see pictures from the time when this museum had tours inside of how the torments were conducted. And they were all, let's say, overseen by specialists, by lawyers, by the very authorities of the church. The period should not be too prolonged, not exceed 30 minutes in some cases. Not women were not exposed to the same treatments as men. For example, men were more like exposed to these physical, let's say, punishments. In the case of women, instead, they use a system to create a fake drowning. Like they put a piece of fabric in the mouth of the victim, of the person, of the woman, and they pour water in the fabric. So in that way, the feeling of asphyxia would be such that it would be a terrible torment, more psychological in a way, because at the end, the person would not be killed. But it was a terrible way of taking information, and especially a confession. So Manuel Bautista Perez is the other case, the other character we're going to talk about. Manuel Bautista is pointed as a very, very wealthy man of his days. He arrived to Peru at the beginning of the 17th century. So it means that the Inquisition was already here. He was a merchant. He was a very, let's say, good-hearted man with the church. He offered lots of money to the church. He moved next to the church of the Franciscan order, so to become an active supporter of this very important church. He was a slave trader, a very rich slave trader. As in North America, also many Jewish men of wealth were slave traders. So this was the source of his wealth, right? But he had many friends and also many enemies. And sometimes when we are talking about, for example, wealth, in most of the cases, there were many people that wanted to take off let's say, the business, other people, not to gain that space. So possibly this is what happened finally to Mr. Manuel Bautista Perez. Anyways, Mr. Bautista Perez, who lived in this beautiful house, this nowadays is a house that belongs to the government. This is the Tribunal Constitucional, a high court of Peru, located in downtown Lima. This is one of the oldest pictures, by the way, I found of this house. It's a colonial house from the year 1590. There is where Manuel Bautista Perez went to live. He rented this house. And the house that he rented was so big that he could live there with all his family. He had a very big family. He was a Portuguese, so as you know, most likely a Jewish man, not just Portuguese, Jew as well, since the beginning, right? So, but back then, well, his wealth also made him be in the inner circles of the most important people of Lima, of the Viceroy, etc. So he was a very, very well assimilated man in the society of that time. Until, by the way, this is a picture of nowadays, of this place, until something tragic happened to him. And this house that you see here, the house that used to be his home, is pointed as the first synagogue of Lima. So how come? Well, not just that this was the first synagogue. The first rabbi of Lima, we know, was Mr. Bautista Perez. So, well, the story says that this is a legend of Lima that, passed mouth to mouth until nowadays. So, well, the story says that it was a Friday night. It was the year 1634, and a drunken man, which was walking in the streets of Lima, very confused about where he was looking for maybe more partying that night. He got into this house. The house had the door semi-open, right? So he got in, maybe he confused the house with his own, maybe he believed there was a party in there, so he got in, and the deeper he went into the house, the more strange the situation turned, because he started to hear voices of men talking, right? So when he got deeper in the house, he saw men reunited, talking in a very strange language, and hear about this story, they were lashing an image of Jesus Christ, right? So all of them, the story says, they were beating the image of Jesus Christ with a lash. So he, of course, this man, immediately after seeing this scene, he left the house and he went straight to the Inquisition, and he accused the people he saw in this reunion of Jews. So the Inquisition the day after came to this house and took Mr. Manuel Bautista Perez with all of his friends, the ones that were recognized by these men, into the Inquisition cells, the dungeons, and they remain inside for a space of several years until the year 1639, when the Inquisition took them out on an auto de fe. So this is possibly the way how Mr. Manuel Bautista Perez dressed up for that last event, in which he had to wear a San Benito. San Benito is these clothes you see here with like a conic shaped hat, this white it's a vest. You can see also in this reproduction, this is a painting, aquarela, watercolor from the year 1820, in which the artist represented how was the fashion of the men who were taken to the auto de fe in the main square of Lima. So this is the San Benito. You can see also the twisted cross at the front, in the front part of this, let's say, rope, that represents the twisted relation, the wrong relation of this person with the church, with the one and only faith, which was believed back then, the Catholic faith. So, I'm going to turn over here. So, next character, next personality we're going to talk about is Ana de Castro. Ana de Castro, or Maria Francisca Ana de Castro, called La Bella Toledana, the beautiful Toledana. Toledo is located in Spain. She was originally from there, came to Lima in the 18th century, and she made a fortune of her own, but also she was so beautiful, so attractive. She was a woman that's a very avant-garde, because she had many lovers also after her husband died, her first husband died. She also remarried. She had also many lovers. So she was a very well-off lady, but she also gained lots of enemies. And one of her enemies was a former lover that she didn't want to continue with. So he accused her of Jew to the Inquisition. So when she was taken by the Inquisition, or the inquisitors, she eventually confessed that she had connections, family connections, with people that were Jews in Spain. Even some of her relatives were killed by the Inquisition in Spain. And that she also contemplated, she respected the Shabbat. But she didn't believe that was against the scriptures, right? So immediately after, the church decided to burn her. And she is famous because she is the last person who was killed by the Inquisition in an auto de fe. The auto de fe with these public ceremonies in which people were shown as Protestants or Jews in public. So in that way, if they didn't repent it, they would be killed in the main square or in another location determined, and all their family, all their relatives will be expelled and their money confiscated. Noreen, thank you so much for your tip support. It helps me a lot. Muchas gracias. Thank you. So Here you can see a representation of an auto de fe. This one is the auto de fe of the year 1639, the same year, actually the same event in which Manuel Bautista Perez was killed, and his, in total, 11 friends who were discovered in this ceremony, which possibly was a ceremony related with the Shabbat, because it was a Friday night, right? So we have here the main square of Lima, the fountain that you can still see in my tours of the historic center, exact same fountain. You can see this building over here is where nowadays is the house of the president of Peru. Back then, it used to be the house of the viceroy. So in here, all the people used to reunite around the main square to see this bloodshed, right? To see the killing of men and women who were accused for their faith. So, but not all of the people were killed there. In some occasions, if they repented, they could keep their lives, but they would be expelled from these territories. So you would be going very poor and also humiliated. In the case of Manuel Bautista Perez, he died as a Jewish martyr because he accepted his faith and he did not want to change his faith. So, but not in all of the cases people were killed, burned in the main square. And this is because sometimes, according to the situation, sometimes the smells of the smoke of the burned bodies was too heavy, too strong, and people did not like that in Lima. So it was made a decision of moving the Camadero, the burning place, to a site located approximately 600 to 700 meters away from the main square of Lima, across the river. So this place still exists, actually. And it has a plaque, which you can see also in the next one, in which, the community, the Jewish community, the Catholic community, the Protestant community, and even the authorities of that time, that is the mayor of Lima of those days, reunited, created a plaque to commemorate the people, the innocents who were killed by the persecution of the Inquisition in this territory, right? So a very important plague. And here I want to share at the end of this event the interesting case of the Jewish community of Celendin in Cajamarca. And before we go to this part of the event, I want to tell you that the community of Lima, the Jewish community of Lima of the 16th, 17th century periods, in which the Jews migrated to Peru, escaping from the atrocities of the Inquisition in Spain, this community, this Sephardic community, eventually was forced to integrate, was pushed to integrate. There's lots of Jewish blood running everywhere in Lima from this period, like we mix so much, and eventually we are all integrated. But the traditions were not able to resist until these days. But, always bad, there is an interesting community in the North Highlands of Peru that I'm going to be talking about in this moment, that was able to, through some endogamic, let's say, traditions, and also the isolation, right, to resist the passing of the time, and also continue until nowadays carrying a bigger, let's say, traces of the Jewish tradition till nowadays. So now let me tell you a little bit about how I got into these conclusions. And in part, thanks to the investigations of Mr. Nathan Watchell. And this gentleman, he's an historian. He has dedicated lots of his investigations to the Jewish presence in Peru. Remember that in the times of the 16th, 18th, 19th century, the European Jewish community decided to emigrate better to North America because Peru was too distant, too far away. So there was not a constant immigration to Peru. after the 16th century, right? It almost stopped until after the independence of Peru. So Mr. Nathan Watchell, he investigated the communities from the early colonial times that move into more distant locations from Lima, from the capital, and how their traditions evolve. And he went in direction to Cajamarca. Cajamarca, as you can see, is located in the north of Peru. It's a department in the north of Peru. Cajamarca is divided also in provinces, and here we have the province of Celendin. And by the way, my family from my father's side comes from Celendin. This is a smaller section, a district called Celendin. So my family comes from this section over here from my father's side, right? So why I'm telling you this? Well, I will answer in a moment. So Mr. Nathan was very interested in the people of this location because the people from that zone, they are also unusually very like blonde, like light, very like light blue eyes. So it's very, very unusual. Even the looks of the people there, very not typical to the ones of the indigenous people, right? So, and here, after some investigations done by him in that territory, he came to the following conclusions and also notes that I'm going to be sharing with you. So, first of all, the founder of Celendin was a Jewish converso, Mr. Raimundo Pereira. So, we are in the right pathway, right? This man, Raimundo Pereira, was also Portuguese, right? So we know already Portuguese Jew is pretty much the same in the colonial times, right? Also, the descendants of that community are called Chilicos. There are many that are Chilicos, and Chilico comes from the Jewish word Shiloh in Hebrew, which is related with the word followers of the Messiah. Also about the Portuguese tradition in that land is the only part in Peru. Well, when someone is called cursed, like maldito in Spanish, the local people call them maldiciado. And maldiciado, so far I know, it's a Portuguese word. So maldiciado, we never say that in Peru, but in that zone is the only place where they call people, cursed people, like maldito or maldiciado. So in the cemeteries, another interesting thing, people still have the tradition of putting stones on top of the graves or pieces of the tiles of the roof tiles that belong to the house of the dead person as a way of respect. The chapel of one of the communities in that territory had no crosses at the entrance until the beginnings of the 20th century, of the 2000s. So this is very strange because in Peru, every chapel has to have a cross. Nowadays, well, it was put because people are already, aware that this is unusual there. But traditionally, it had no cross at the entrance. The burials were usually back then, in the old days, without a coffin. So people were just using a coffin for their dead, just for transporting the dead to the cemetery, and the dead was covered with linens and then put in holes. And the coffin was later reused. Gracias, Liz. Thanks for your support. Muchas gracias, amiga. Also, the graves sometimes don't have a cross. That is also very unusual. The old ones from the beginnings of the 20th century, for example, don't have crosses. In the graves also, you can see a star in the section where is the birth date and a cross in the section where is the death date. So the star is very unique to that site. In no other part of Peru you will find a star in the birth date. There is endogamy for many generations. It was practiced constantly until pretty much the generation of my grandfather. It was typical that people prefer that the ones of the community married in the community and not externally. There is in the culinary a food that is called the pizza celendina, or the bread soup. And this is also a very strange dish, like for Peruvians especially, because it is made from bread, from simple bread, and cheese with no salt, and it's used chicken, not beef, not pork, not fish. Like, it's just chicken. So chicken, bread, and cheese. It's like a pizza. Very, very unusual. You will not find something like that anywhere in Peru. All the Moises are called Moshe there in that zone. Is the rule. And you will not find that in other parts of Peru. The arrival of a house is also very interesting. People, instead of knocking the door straight, they always touch the right side of the door, the frame of the door, and then they make the sign of the cross, right? And then after they knock the door. So this seems to be like a reminder of the old tradition of touching the, I think it's called the mezuzah, right? But of course, because of the imposition of the Catholic traditions, they made the sign of the cross, and then they get in the house. And also the lit up of candles on Friday by women. And also that was practiced in some monasteries in Lima, convents in Lima, until the 1970s. So this is really, really interesting. Here you can see the chapel of Santa Ana of Chaquil, which is the little town where this old colonial chapel had no crosses. So now, of course, you have the crosses, but those are new. And this is the this pizza from Celendin, the traditional bread soup, which looks like a pizza. So very, very unique from this territory. Also, well, a little bit about me. My name is Vanessa Vasquez, as you know. So I had like a lot of interest for many years in the Jewish community. And I don't know why I always had this very big affection for the community, although I am not Jewish. And I know very few people that are Jewish here in Peru, because the community is very small. It's about less than 3,000 people in the whole country. So, but I had something like a very special affection for the community. So now, thanks to the investigations of Mr. Nathan Watchell, I know that from my father's side, especially the community where my family from my father's side came from, there is a large descendancy of Jews. And my last name is in the list of the Sephardic descendants in Peru, Vasquez, as well as Urrutia. That's from my mother's side too, but I have not really much information from that side. So possibly there is a connection that I have from that side of my family with the Jewish community, the Sephardic community. And by the way, this is my grandfather, Segundo Vasquez, and you can see him in his early years, and also before he passed away. And he, although the pictures don't make really justice, he was very fair skinned, very like light blue eyes. He had very, very unusual features for someone that is indigenous, like Peruvian, because he came from Cajamarca, that's the North Andes, right? And all the people from the community where he came from were pretty much like that. So very, very interesting seeing that there is a possibility that I have also some ancestry, Sephardic ancestry from in that part of my genealogy. Carol, at the peak, how many Jews were there in Peru? Well, it's very hard to estimate, Carol, because most of the Jews that were here were not coming as Jews. There were great numbers of Spaniards coming at the time of the late, let's say, 15th, early 16th century to the Americas. So most likely it would be impossible to tell you a number. It will not make justice because as the information I was sharing with you, possibly 75% of the European blood that was coming to Peru to the Americas was Jewish blood as well, no? So, but well, at the end, were they also feeling, identifying as Jews? Well, we will not know too. Maybe some of them were Jewish descendants. Some of them were actually active Jews that were practicing, like crypto Jews that were practicing their faith, but they were not saying it outside. No, it was just for them. But it might have been a very big number, and the number of Jews that were captured by the Inquisition was tiny, like maybe 0.1% of the real number of Jews that came here. So, is there? I see some questions, Judy. It's wonderful that you were. Oh no, gracias, Judy. It's always a pleasure, and of course, I would love to do, Alan, my DNA test. No, that would be lovely. That would be more conclusive. No. Also, if you would like to know about the bibliography, I was looking into for later investigation. If you want to read a little bit in Spanish, maybe some of these documents are in English. I'm not very sure about it, but the one I think it is in English is this one, which is the book from Mr. Hugo Luden, Francisco Pizarro, The Secret Symbol. I think you can find it in a translated book in internet. Also, check out the different videos in YouTube from Mr. Nathan Watchell. He was the person who has enlightened actually this tour. Gracias, Jessica. Thank you so much. Thank you for your support. And well, we have also other really wonderful books here in the list. So if you want also a little bit more of the information about the books, just contact me. At the end, in a moment, I'm going to share with you my personal information if you want to send me a message. And don't forget, tomorrow we have 2 tours. I'm going with my husband to do these tours in Miraflores. First, we're going to visit the famous cats of Kennedy Park, and we're going to have finally a sunset with love stories, because I was not able to be for you on the Valentine's Day, so I'm going to make up with you all tomorrow. And also, well, for the next event I'm going to be conducting for let's say my Untold History, I'm going to talk about the Japanese immigration to Peru. It is going to be about the Japanese immigration. This is a very fascinating story. Maybe you remember about President Fujimori. So if you want to learn more about this one, stay tuned. Activate the notifications for this event of the Untold History of Peru. And also here you have my Facebook. You have my Facebook group, Facebook and Instagram also. My website, if you would like to know more about what I do in Lima. I do private tours. I'll do different kinds of things here in Lima. And also you can follow my Hego channel if you wish to learn a bit more about what I am going to be doing soon. So thank you so much for your tip support, because it helps me a lot to continue doing these events. Also, keep in mind that I share these tips with Hego, so in that way Hego continues growing. So you are not just helping me, you're helping Hego at the same time. Muchas gracias. Thanks for your participation. I hope to see you tomorrow with these tours I'm preparing, the cats, the sunset, and we're going to have so much fun. We're going to relax. I have lots of stories to tell you, romantic stories. Gracias, Bertie. Gracias, Suhan. Thank you so much. God bless you all. So we're going to have a lot of fun tomorrow. So, well, thank you. If you have a question, a final question, you can share it here. If not, let me wish you a good night. Sleep well, sleep tight, and see you tomorrow. See you in a couple of days. God bless you. God bless Ukraine. God bless the people that are having a very difficult moments because of the war. So my prayers are with them, with Olga, our colleague of Hego in Ukraine, in Kiev. So, well, let's send them positive thoughts and prayers for them to be protected and okay. Thank you so much. Muchas gracias. Oh, Suhan, gracias. Thanks for your participation. Thank you so much. Best to you. Love from Lima. Bye-bye. See you soon. Thank you.